if I became a Christian, well, wouldn't I just spend my life worrying about sin and feeling guilty? Maybe this is something you're wondering about. You know, if you became a Christian, well, doesn't that mean that there's now this thing called sin, and all the fun stuff that I like doing must therefore be bad? So I'm just going to feel guilty the whole time because, well, if we're honest, we know we'll probably end up breaking some of the rules somewhere along the line. I mean, isn't Christianity really about keeping a whole list of rules anyway? You know, in the Bible we see all these rules, and don't we have to keep them to make God happy and make Him love us? Well, I think that's quite a common attitude, but it totally misunderstands Christianity. You see, if we're talking about any other religion or any other worldview for that matter, I think I'd probably agree with that idea. That we're, worried about messing up and feeling guilty the whole time. Well, why is that? I think it's because every other religion or worldview eventually breaks down into ultimately being about you performing. And Christianity is radically different to that, as it doesn't start there at all. Even non-religious people acknowledge that there's generally a right way to live and a wrong way to live. And if we're honest, we'd agree that, they don't always meet the mark. And this is not something that is just, concocted by some religion, this intuition, this conscience. It's hardwired into every single one of us. To illustrate, let me tell you a story about a friend I had a few years back. I'd become a Christian, and so she had asked me a couple of questions about, why I'm a Christian. And I gave her some reasons for believing that God exists and believing that the Bible is true and that Jesus is actually who He said He is. And I went on to then tell her about the grace that He offers and the forgiveness that He brings. What she said with me stuck with me for many, many years. She said it's all too much. She knows what she has done in her life, and there's no way she can forgive herself, much less having God forgive her. And so what is the relevance? Why do I tell that story? You see, my friend wasn't religious, but it was the reality that she had messed up in her life that wrapped her with guilt. And that came without any set of religious rules. You see, culture is continually telling us that if we live free and wipe away any boundary and pursue our hearts, then we'll be happy. Well, from personal experience and this experience of my friend that she articulated so clearly, it's simply not true. And so the question isn't so much about how the guilt arises, but rather what do we do with that guilt? How do we deal with it? You see, her conclusion, which is very much the conclusion of the world, it would lay on you basically that you need to do better and you need to be better. You need to make sure all your good deeds outweigh the bad deeds. You need to work harder to follow the path to self-enlightenment and escape the karmic cycle and live life the perfect way. You need to please everyone and not get cancelled. And then you'll be acceptable and somehow work away and atone for our guilt. But the problem is no one can actually do that. Well, not perfectly anyway. And so it always sticks with us. And that's where Jesus Christ is radically different and radically unique. You see, becoming a Christian means realizing and recognizing that we're flawed and that we need something outside of us to fix us. We need someone to take away our guilt and shame. We need forgiveness. And that's really what being a Christian really is. You see, Jesus Christ, from where Christianity gets its name, taught that none of us actually meets the mark, and so our guilt is actually legitimate, every single one of us. And so God steps in and pays the price for our sin and shame, and then in return He offers us forgiveness and new life with Him. One of the Psalms in the Bible puts it this way. It says, "As far as the east is from the west, so far has He removed our transgressions from us." And that is good news. So for the person who's worried about sin and feeling guilty, which is surely every one of us, that is in fact the greatest reason to become a Christian. Because God will free you from that burden when you come to Him and put your trust in Him.